eyes wide open. Have you ever seen a deer in the woods that just wasn't right? In the dark forest of Appalachia, locals whisper about the not deer, a creature that looks almost normal until it doesn't. Don't forget to subscribe and let's take a look.
Emergency broadcast. Appalachian region. Class 4 mimicry alert in effect. Subject: the not deer. The entity mimics injury to lure you out of your car. If you see a wounded animal, do not stop. It is a trap. Check the eyes. Prey animals have eyes on the side. If it looks at you with front-facing eyes, it is a predator. It wears a disguise that does not fit. Look for too many joints in the legs or a neck that moves like a snake. Your defense is indifference. Do not scream. Do not acknowledge it. It feeds on your fear. If it stands up on two legs to walk toward you, pray for a quick end. Stay inside.
What's wrong with it?
It looked like a deer, but something was wrong. Its legs bent the wrong way. Its eyes didn't reflect light. They swallowed it, and when it moved, it didn't run. It twitched. Like it forgot how bones are supposed to work. Locals call it the not deer, a creature that mimics the look of a deer, but not the behavior. If you see one near the tree line, don't stare, don't speak, and whatever you do, don't follow it.
They say if you see a deer, but something feels off, run, because that's not a deer. In the dense forests of Appalachia, locals whisper of an entity known only as the not deer. It looks like a deer at first glance, but the longer you stare, the more wrong it becomes. Its legs bend in unnatural directions. Its eyes are forward-facing, like a predator. It doesn't flee, it watches. Some say it walks on two legs when it thinks no one is looking. Others claim it mimics voices, calling out for help in the night. Park rangers won't talk about it. Hunters refuse to enter certain areas after dark. One man from North Carolina claims he shot a deer, but when he approached the body, it grinned. When he blinked, it was gone. Some believe it's a Wendigo-like shapeshifter. Others say it's something ancient, older than the forest itself.
It's not that we're essentially afraid of the not a deer. It's the fear that we have of what the not a deer truly is. Folklore states that not a deer have shape-shifting abilities as well as other abilities that you really shouldn't discuss because doing so will evoke them. It's not that we're afraid of the not a deer. It's that we're afraid of what the not a deer is. Remember, not a deer are in the same genre as mimics when it comes to abilities. So what do mimics want? They want you. They want to lure you in. They know what scares you. I would recommend for you to go and take a look at the history of shapeshifting and the different types of abilities that shapeshifters will take on. And that would probably give you a better idea of the types of abilities you'd be dealing with when you see not a deer. I have seen not a deer several times and hear the experiences that I've had with them. I've seen them on really common, highly used paths when I go hiking, and I've seen them when we've been camping pretty deep in the forest. What I experienced was basically they will come right up to you. They have no fear whatsoever, and I'm used to that with deer, and I'm not afraid of deer. But it's not like they want fed from you. It's like they're looking through you almost. And, you know, deer have dark eyes, but their eyes are just vacant, and they look like they're looking through you. And that's when you follow that rule that I have repeated over and over. If you think you saw something, no, you didn't. Go ahead and act like you're not scared, and you just slowly get them out of there. No, these aren't the diseased deer. Those are very sad. These are frightening.
These two young sisters discovered the hard way that you don't go wandering around in the forest. The following story was submitted by one of my followers, and it's about her two young daughters who were lost in the woods just this past October and a terrible creature that they encountered. This lady lives on about an acre of property, and directly behind their house is a forest, and there's a well-marked trail that goes through the middle of the forest that everyone sticks to. It's surrounded by fields on either side, but when you reach a certain point, it opens up into an even bigger forest. This particular October day, these two sisters, who were 8 and 12 at the time, they set out to go through the forest on this well-marked trail I'm sure they had been on before. And after a certain point, they reached this area where the woods opened up, and they realized they were lost. They went approximately 2 or 3 hours without being found or knowing where they were at before they did eventually wander into another neighborhood and reach safety. But what they encountered during those 2 or 3 hours scarred them for life. They somehow had journeyed 8 miles from their house over this 2 to 3 hour window, and the story they shared with their mom later on still puzzles this family even today. After they set out on their journey, they made their way through the forest, they stayed on the trail, and at some point they realized they were lost. They didn't know how to get back home, they didn't know where they were at, and they became panicked. They were frightened. When they finally did get rescued and got back home to their mom, they were sharing their story, what they experienced, how scared they were, and the creatures that they seen. While they were out there wandering around, they were again terrified. They said at some point there were these 2 deer-looking creatures. They looked like deer. They were a whitish gray or ash color, but they were walking on their hind legs. They were moving in unison together. They ran past these girls. They both had antlers on the top of their head, and where their eyes should be were just 2 dark, black, sunken-in holes. The girls said these creatures were moving extremely fast, faster than humans, but they didn't make much noise. They didn't make any kind of moaning or screaming sound. The only noise was from their hooves as they were running past them. Now, prior to that part of the story, they also told their mom that they were so scared that they had stopped to pray. They prayed to ask God to save them, to rescue them, to help them get out. They were completely terrified. And it was just a few minutes later when these 2 not deer or wendigos ran by them. The family still had more questions than answers because you know your children as a parent. You know when your children are being honest or telling the truth. That's just part of being a parent. And she knew that her daughters are telling the truth. They both, whether they were together or separate, told the same story. She found where I had shared a couple of stories of people with similar experiences, which they call them not deer, or some people call them wendigos or wendigos, and she began to research it. Her research led her to believe that these creatures were in fact wendigos or wendigos, and she actually printed out a picture, and I'm going to share it with you guys here in just a moment, of what a wendigo was supposed to look like. She went to each of her daughters separately, first to her oldest daughter, and showed her this printout picture of a wendigo, and her oldest daughter confirmed, this is exactly what we've seen. That's it. She then went to her youngest daughter with the same picture. The oldest daughter wasn't even around, and showed her, and she also confirmed, that's what we've seen. The 2 creatures we've seen, that's it to a T.
The American Wendigo is terrifying. You see, it tries to lure you into the woods by mimicking people or animals or whistling sounds to try and draw you outside. Now, there's a lot of lore around the Wendigo. For instance, they say you should never look it in the eyes because once you do, it will have control over you and can lure you out into the woods. They also say it has this supernatural ability to make pets not be aware of its presence. And it's also said that it cannot enter a home that is not built with wood from the forest which it resides. There was this woman named Kathy. Kathy said during this period of her life, she was going through some really hard financial times. And she had this friend who owned several acres and had this trailer. And her friend was like, if you need a place to stay until you get back on your feet, you can come live in my trailer. But the trailer, was like a mess. You'd have to clean it up, but you're more than welcome to come here. So Kathy takes her friend up on this offer. She drives across country and she gets to her friend's house about 8 at night. Her friend immediately takes her to this trailer, which is almost like a half a mile away from where she lives. So Kathy goes inside the trailer. It was like this huge mess, and she started cleaning it up and making it look nice. At about 1 o'clock at night, she started to get tired. So she said, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and lay down. Now, being that they were in the middle of the woods, she didn't think she should lock her door on the trailer because she said, we're out here in the middle of nowhere. Who's going to get us? So her and her dog, they lay down and they go to sleep. Well, at 3 in the morning, she hears something outside of the trailer. And she notices her dog, who's laying right next to her, has lifted up its head and is moving it left to right like it has picked up on something. And that's when she hears her friend's voice say, "Kathy, come on outside." And she almost responded to her because she thought it was her friend until she realized it was 3 in the morning and her friend goes to bed like at 9 o'clock. And she also thought it was weird that the dog didn't even respond to this thing. So she just lays in her bed holding onto her dog, and the dog is shaking and terrified. And that's when she starts hearing scratching sounds on the side of the trailer. And once again, she hears her friend's voice say, "Kathy, come outside right now, come outside." And this whole time, she's just holding onto her dog, kind of freaking out. And then that's when she said the front door of this trailer opened up by itself. And she didn't want to look. She didn't want to see what was coming through that door. So she just put her head down. And she could hear this thing sort of breathing and groaning as it entered into her trailer. And she hears her friend's voice say, "Look at me right now. Look me in the eyes." And she doesn't respond. She doesn't say anything. And she said she started to say this prayer that she knew when she was a young girl. And she kept saying it over and over again. And eventually, whatever this was, left the trailer and took off into the woods. The next morning, she goes to her friend's house and she confirms that her friend was asleep and did not visit her. And she said, to this day, she is terrified to stay alone.
Mysterious creature haunts Tennessee. New theories emerge about the Not Deer. April 2020 in the forests of Tennessee. Something strange is lurking, something that is both deer and decidedly not. Local cryptid enthusiasts have long been fascinated by the creature, known as the Not Deer, a term coined for its unsettling appearance that resembles a deer, but with disturbing abnormalities. New theories surrounding its existence have emerged in recent weeks. The Not Deer is typically described as having distorted features, too many limbs, unnaturally long necks, or eyes that are too large and too human-like. Witnesses report that its movements are jerky, almost mechanical, and its behavior unnervingly predatory. Over the past few years, the cryptid has appeared in various reports, often from hunters or hikers who claim to have encountered it while deep in the woods. This April, the creature's mystery deepened. Some researchers now suggest that the Not Deer could be the result of unknown environmental factors, perhaps a genetic anomaly caused by chemicals or radiation. Others propose that the creature may be a flesh and bone entity, something part of a greater, supernatural force, or even an interdimensional being that occasionally slips through into our world. Some of the more chilling theories have emerged from reports of unusual phenomena preceding sightings, odd electrical disturbances, a sense of time distortion, and strange sounds that don't seem to come from any known animal. Could the Not Deer be a manifestation of something otherworldly, perhaps? A creature crossing over from a parallel dimension, or even an ancient forest guardian? For now, the Not Deer remains an enigma, with cryptid hunters and locals alike continuing to speculate whether it is an evolutionary oddity or a paranormal presence. One thing is certain: The legend of the Not Deer is far from over, and its mysteries are only beginning to unfold.
We are going to go into a personal story that will probably make me look like a complete idiot, but I'm going to tell you about my story that took place probably in about 2008 in Nifley, Kentucky, which is near Russell Springs area. I usually work 2 shifts on the weekends. I work the doubles working at the nursing home, and I was in the car driving back from the nursing home after a long day. And it was probably about 2 in the morning when I finally was going around the swamp to turn on the road that took me to my house. Now, I had never heard of the no deer before, not a deer before. I've never heard of that. And when I recently came across this cryptid, I was like, holy crap, that is what I saw on this road that night. So when I turn on that road, and there's a dip that goes like this, and then there's woods right there, and it's kind of like almost like a round swamp, but not really, and it's dry. It's just where the high grass is, but in that area it was cleared, like they had just mowed it. Well, I saw a deer crossing the road, and it got in the middle of the road of my headlights. And I was like, what is up with this deer? It had legs. This probably isn't a part of the no deer part, but the legs were teeny tiny legs of a full body deer. And when it walked all crazy, and its eyes were not on the right spot of its head. It was on the front of its head, like the description of the not deer. And it turned and it looked at me and scared me to death. It wasn't because I was driving alone. It wasn't because I had a long night at the nursing home and I was just trying to get home to get into my bed. It was the way it looked at me and the way it was built and the way it moved all jangly and like it said newborn-like across the road, but it wasn't in a hurry to get away from me. You know when that weird feeling hits you that you need to get the heck up on out of there? Well, it hit me hard and I just took off to the house. And to this day, I cannot tell you what in the hell that deer was. Some of y'all might say that this deer had a deformity, which made it really small, but can y'all please tell me what made its eyes on the front of its head? Because I would love an explanation, and I want to know what happened that night in 2008, because I know I can't be the only one, and I can still see it. It's like it was yesterday, right in my brain, you know.
Just a heads up, this story comes with a picture of what they believe to be a not deer, so if that is not what you want to see today, I totally understand. Something important to note about Angela, who wrote in this story before we get into it, is that she was born with an eye issue. She had to go to eye convergence therapy to literally train herself how to use her eyes. And now a side effect is that she can dilate her eyes on her own. So one night Angela's outside and she lets her dog out to use the bathroom and whistles for her dog to come back. And that's when everything around her goes silent. She lives on the edge of the woods surrounded by nature. This is not normal. Nature is loud. And then the whistle came back to her, followed by her dog sprinting towards her. Now fast forward to present day. It is 2 years later and she lets her dog out again. She's had no experiences, no occurrences. She's been fine. She lets her dogs out, notices that she hears a rustling of leaves. She goes to where she heard it from to see what kind of animal it is to make sure it's not one injured. And then everything suddenly gets very dark. Like, way darker than she anticipated. She couldn't see anything. Everything's silent, and then that same whistle that she used 2 years prior to get her dog's attention comes back to her. Her dog bolted back just like it always had, and they scurried inside. As she's walking inside, something unidentified makes a really loud and sharp noise. Like, it sounded like something huge landed right where she was. She went outside to check the next day, and nothing was out of place. Nothing had fallen. But here's a picture of the deer that she keeps seeing around her property that she believes is a not deer. Literally has an antler growing out of its eye.
Now, there are deer that get up on their hind legs so that they can grab something off of a tree to eat. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about deer that walk on their hind legs like a human does. Most of the people who have encountered this are driving on a road at night through a remote area and they see a deer and they're like, oh, I need to slow down. There's a deer and it might jump out in front of me. And then the closer they get to it, the more things that they start to see are wrong with it. And everyone describes this feeling of dread.
A long stretch of highway, and there are trees all over on both sides. And these two guys are driving down in the dark on this windy road when all of a sudden they look over and there's this tall deer-like figure that they assumed was a deer at the beginning, and then it changed. So they are looking at each other and they're like, what is that? And they're like, I thought it was a deer. And all of a sudden the deer goes back on its hind legs and stands up like over 7 feet tall. And the feet are really skinny and it looks like a deer, but it doesn't look like a deer at the exact same time. And all of a sudden these guys are like, that is not normal. We're getting the heck out of here. So they accelerate and they keep taking off and they're like, I don't know what that thing is. Next thing you know, they're going like almost 100 miles an hour on this highway stretch, and they look over and this thing is looking at them in their window, running next to them the entire way. They freak out. They're not sure what to do. So naturally, they just keep going. And this thing is keeping up with them. At first, they thought it was a deer. Then they definitely were like, that's a skinwalker. There's no way that that is normal. They run in to town and eventually lose this thing, and they run right to the police station, and they're telling the police station all about it. They look crazy, but the police are like, all right, we're going to go check it out. So the police go into the area that they were talking about on this stretch of the highway, and all of a sudden the cop's sitting there and he's looking for something when all of a sudden this thing walks up by his window. And he wouldn't think much of it, but all of a sudden this deer-like thing stands up back on its back legs, just like these guys talked about. So he starts accelerating and he's like, forget this. Like, I know what these guys are talking about now. And he starts taking off. Same thing. He looks over on the side of his window and this creature is looking at him in his side window, almost like he's just standing there. He thought for a second that this creature had like jumped onto his car. No, he's running with the speed of this car over 100 miles an hour, just watching this police officer. And then the police officer was a true believer. He was like, I don't know what that is exactly, but don't go out in the woods alone in that area, especially by yourself. There are a lot of weird things out in the forest that we cannot say what they are because we don't know 100%, but there are a lot of the same sightings of these weird types of objects. Usually, like skinwalkers, will take the form of a creature that they have just taken out to transform into this.
Jared and his friends had an experience with a not deer or a flesh pedestrian. This happened in the summer of 2005. Him and his friends were 13 years old during the time, and they were out of school for the summer, and they were bored, and they wanted something fun to do, some adventures with friends. Jared had a friend named Will. Will's father was looking for some land for sale. He found on a website like 50 acres, all woods, and it came with an abandoned house. And it was condemnable. There was no repairing this house. It was just land for sale, comes with a house, a creepy house out in the woods. Use the land for hunting, basically. So Will told Jared and the other friends about this, and they got the big idea that they were going to explore this abandoned house way out in the woods. And that's what they set off to do. Will's dad actually loaded the boys up, drove them all the way out to the location where it was, or near it. And they found it because there was like a realtor sign out there on the side of the road. And it was the same amount of acreage listed as on the website. So Will's dad was like, all right, boys, go out and find your abandoned house. Go have fun. I'm gonna nap out in the car. And so that's what they did. So Jared and his friend Will and the other boys go take a hike out there. And there's what looks like what was once a driveway. Probably. It was a pathway, but it was kind of overgrown, but they knew that this was where
somebody had once resided. And they go hike up in a bit, and they come out to this house. And it was probably built in the 50s, maybe. They didn't know. And it's a big house. And it's 2-story. So they walk up it, and the steps are completely rotted. Will's legs fall through. He's fine. They get up, and they have to be very careful. And there's no door on this house. They all go in, and a lot of the floor is missing in some parts of the house, and Will decides, hey guys, let's go upstairs. And the boys are like, yeah. But the stairs were completely unsafe. And Jared was like, hey guys, we cannot do this. But so anyways, they go to like the den. And there's like this big window. Long window. And it looks out into the backyard. And they don't see anything out there. It's just woods. And they're exploring this den. It's a big den. And one of the boys says, hey, there's a deer right there. And Jared notices that, yeah, the window is actually like shattered out. Like there's actually no more window there. And this deer in broad daylight sticks his head through where the window is and just stares at him. And they all get the creeps. And it just keeps staring. Jared's like, guys, we gotta get out of here. And they're like, yeah. And as they're getting ready to turn around and go out the main door, the deer actually talks. It opens its mouth and says, don't go. The boys themselves and ran out. They ran down the pathway. They stumbled through brush and thorns, and they're yelling, they're screaming, they're crying. And they get back to the car where Will's dad is asleep, and his dad had actually locked the doors, and they had to bang on the window screaming and crying. So Will's dad was like, what the happened, guys? This is ridiculous. And they're screaming, go, go, go. And so his dad's like, what did you guys see out there? As he's turning around and going. And he goes. And they're going down this road. And as they're going down the road, a deer hops across the road. And the boys, Jared said him and the boys were screaming to just keep going, don't stop. So his dad keeps going. And he said, guys, what the hell did you guys see out there in the woods? And Jared and Will and the other boys are saying that the deer talked to us. The deer talked. It talked to us. It said, don't go. And Will's dad laughed about it. He said, you guys your imagination is playing with you. None of this is real. And they cried and cried all the way home. And they never went on another stupid adventure again.
If you see a deer that doesn't blink, doesn't breathe right, or looks just a little too human, turn around and don't look back. Sometimes what looks familiar isn't human at all. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and as always, stay safe, stay aware, and question everything.